Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas podcast, taping this on a Sunday evening. Tennessee played less than 24 hours ago, so you know that means we have to do a podcast about it without Ryan Shumpert, who, I mean, just goodness gracious, the pessimism in the group chat, in the Go Big Orange Friday group chat was undeniable, and it was just too much for Ryan to face the music of a Tennessee Volunteer dub. Jack Foster saw it coming, the Joe's best game possible this year. He saw that, so shout out to Always College Football's Jack Foster, who is also not here today, but he's riding out on top as the Joe Milton best game of the season pick from a week ago. So to talk all about what happened last night in Lexington, Kentucky, it's the Chicago Bears fan himself over there in enemy territory in South Carolina, Ethan Stone of SaturdayDownSouth.com. Ethan, good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing great. Doing very well. Tennessee football gets the win yesterday. Bears gone on Sunday Night Football tonight.
Oh.
Vols basketball wins over Michigan State in an exhibition. Man, I'm thriving. It's a great time to be a sports fan. That's for sure.
Did they win? Because the Tennessee graphic said doesn't count for both sides.
Yes. Many are saying that game did not count. Indeed, the charity exhibition against Michigan State, but fun regardless. Yeah, thrilling. One of the best exhibition games I've ever watched. I'll say that straight up.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, folks. I didn't watch it. Can't watch it yet. I have too much on my plate. And in all seriousness, that's where... Man. I mean, I'm a busy man, but also there's just only so much I can do. And I'm also just not a regular season guy. I'm a big regular season guy. Exhibition guy. Takes a lot. Like preseason football, like I'll watch the clips and see what happens. But like Jordan Gainey played well. Dalton Connect had a poster. Hey,
it's hard to take too much about it. Like it's like Ryan said in the group chat. Tyreek Key, 26 against Gonzaga last year.
Yeah.
And then he disappeared for the entire year. So, take it with a grain of salt for sure. But still fun for your college basketball junkies.
There you go. Shout out to my friend and co-host on this show too on the Thursday College Basketball Today Stats by Will, Mr. Will Warren, who was geared up, and he also was the only person who was watching exhibition college basketball while also watching NASCAR at the same time. The Venn diagram of people doing that in the United States this week, and it was exactly one. It was a friend of the pod, Will Warren, doing that. So shout out to Will too. 24 hours though after we start every show on this Sunday night during the college football season for the Tennessee Volunteers, asking your biggest takeaway you're still thinking about from Tennessee's victory on the road, 3 straight for Josh Heupel in the series, undefeated as the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. What are you still thinking about, Ethan Stone?
I'm thinking about how well Tennessee was able to run the ball against a very, very underrated Kentucky rush defense. That was, I mean, like I've kind of said it all year. I've not been the highest on Kentucky at SDS. They started, really well, and then they got, pantsed by Georgia, and then, but the thing about them that you got to realize is they're legitimately a good rush defense, and I thought for one of the first times all year that Tennessee would get, kind of punched in the mouth a little bit in that regard. And Jaylen Wright drives the field and has that, big long touchdown to start things off. And then they never slow from there. I think there was 250 plus rushing. I think it was 254, but whatever the number is, it was ridiculous. And so Tennessee was able to run the ball well. And it wasn't just Jaylen Wright. He started it off. And then when he kind of got a little bit of an injury at the end there, Dylan Sampson finished it up. And there was no disconnect whatsoever. And I liked that Milton was able to do a little bit more than just checkdowns. He was kind of making some throws on the run a little bit. He didn't have a perfect game by any means, but I would say it was probably his best of the year. I mean, let's just call it what it was. It wasn't perfect by any means. He wasn't throwing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he did exactly what he needed to. When Tennessee's running the ball like that, there's not a lot of teams that are going to beat them. It's just simple as that. Even when, defensively, and we'll get into it a little bit later, without Kamal Haddon, without Peely, there were a little bit of struggles. But if Tennessee's running the ball that well, it's going to be tough to beat them. It really is. It's going to be tough to beat them.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a tale of two halves, right? Like Jaylen Wright goes out, and we don't see him really at all in the second half. And I mean, it's Dylan Sampson just rises from the ashes and has, I mean, the drive of the season, really, where he puts the team on his back, because I think that cannot be overlooked. Is just, look, Tennessee, they had a one deep shot to Chaz Nimrod in this game. They got Dante Thornton going on the outside, which was huge. And I think that should stick going forward, as he's an outside guy and he's a whole lot more comfortable on that side. So I think that clears some stuff up and some questions for Tennessee. But I think Dylan Sampson just taking the game over and putting the team on his back, and almost costing the team in a weird way, because of he got very, very lucky on that 2 minute and 1 second spot right before the 2 minute warning there, running out of bounds. But outside of that, a perfect drive for Sampson and really solidifying that. I mean, I love Jaylen. He's just a different kind of back. Jaylen's averaging 7 yards a carry at this point in the year, which is still just crazy. But Dylan just, it more than anything, it just makes, like, I just want to get through this year. Like, the lunatic Tennessee fans who I love dearly, who are like, here's how we can still win the East and get to Atlanta. Like, God bless you if you still are thinking 10-2 with this group. But I'm just like, what, 9-3, and let's get through it and move on to basketball and baseball season. But, and then my expectations will be sky high next year with Nico and company. But I think the biggest thing is, like, Dylan Sampson and Cam Seldon going into next year in this group, where I'm like, I'm just excited for Dylan Sampson, and he shouldn't get it yet. And Jaylen Wright's awesome. But when he gets the keys handed to him, and what we've seen with the upside of Cam Seldon and just kind of the early Cordero Patterson comparisons, you're like, man, next year, if you have the combination of Dylan Sampson as the lead guy with Cam Seldon and then maybe Jabari Small coming back again, because that's apparently a possibility that he just keeps coming back as like the third back, which I'm okay with. Like, that's fine as long as he wants to keep coming back. I don't care.
Excellent,
like,
third back,
right? Because he doesn't want to be the main guy. He's just okay with it. So it's like he's the ultimate utility guy, where it's like, all right, he's like the Justin Turner of the Tennessee Volunteers, where you're like, all right, man, like, you're never gonna be the guy. Like, you're just solid. Like, if you want to keep coming back and you don't care about being the main touch guy and just are okay doing a couple drives a game to rest guys, all right, we'll keep having you. Like, it's great. But the name of the game is running the football. This team has unlocked something. As you said here, Ethan, you just trust them to figure it out on the ground. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Texas A&M's front, Kentucky's front. They're going to run the ball at you. So when you see Tennessee fans this year, oh, well, the team X is their rush defense is this, like, I'm not really worried about it, because I think Tennessee's probably going to gash them. I think they're going to win that battle every time. Yeah,
and to your point, coming into this game, that was probably the one thing that I was like, ooh, this is why I think this could be interesting, because like I said earlier, you're without Peely, you're without Haddon, who was a major, and we'll definitely get to that in a second, how awful the secondary looked against Devin Leary. But you're missing all those guys, and you say, okay, the run, like, something's got to give here. Like, at some point, Kentucky's got to smell blood in the water, and they've got to be able to slow them down. And they just couldn't. Like, I thought for sure this how they've performed this season, except for against Georgia, Kentucky has played so well against the run. I thought for sure they'd be able to not really, like, keep them to like 50 yards or anything like that. Like, not completely shut them down. I don't think anyone really has that capability this year. But I did think they were going to keep it to a manageable level, where if Joe Milton had some struggles, which he really didn't, if Joe Milton had some struggles, Kentucky would have been able to win that game. And ultimately, it really didn't matter what Milton did. As long as he did his, 17 for 20, I think is what he ended up with. That's all Tennessee needed. He didn't need to do anything crazy, because you can rush for 250 yards in the ground. You have two of the top 5 best running backs in the SEC. I'd say top 3 running backs in the SEC. And that's crazy to say. That's insane to say.
No, I mean, they're solid. I will say, the body language doctor, a little concerned about Jaylen Wright on the side in those final drives. And in the tweet last night, I don't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that something to monitor? Are we monitoring this over the next couple days? Like, what do we think about here? Because Dylan Sampson quote tweeted it and was positive, so that's optimistic. But I don't know. Jaylen Wright, hard to read week over week. But I hope he does not take issue to not being the main guy here down the stretch, because ultimately it's not like he was. I mean, we don't know what was going on with the injury and if he was being held out for that or whatever. But I mean, you can't take the ball out of Dylan's hands at that point. Like, Dylan was doing everything. He won you the game, really.
I mean, he did. I It's hard to make too much of it because we
Yeah.
don't know what's going on in the locker room. Like Ryan's the only one of us that is even at the pressers here. So it's kind of difficult to say, oh, he's mad that he got taken out of the game if he really wasn't injured or he was injured. We're not going to be able to do anything other than speculate about that.
Yeah.
I mean, his tweet exactly was like something about people not counting him out or something like that. And it's like, you're averaging 7 yards per rush. You are by far the best running back in the SEC this year. There's no way you could say that. So it makes you wonder what's been going on behind.
But also,
the
which
scenes,
Tennessee fan have you found who's in his mentions just
Exactly.
where were you in the second half? Where have you been all year? What Tennessee fan do you know that's complained one iota about Jaylen Wright? He's, like you said, he's the best running back in the SEC this year. We're all very thrilled. We love Jaylen Wright being on our team.
With how Joe Milton has played this year, with how Josh Heupel has kind of called a little bit of iffy play calling at times, you would decide to say Jaylen Wright is the problem? I don't buy it, man.
No, who's in his mentions? I just want to find this person who's upsetting Jaylen Wright week over week, because it's like, what are we doing here, folks? There's a lot of issues week to week with this Tennessee team. Jaylen Wright's never been one of them.
No.
Biggest moment of the game for you was what, Ethan?
Moment would be Kentucky missing their field goal. I think that was just enormous. I mean, obviously, I'm going to get into what I really think it is, which is the drive immediately following that, which was Sampson just going 42 of 65 yards down the field, whether it be on the ground or by Joe Milton throwing it to. I mean, I think Squirrel White had a pretty decent reception in there at one point to gain a first down, but it was all Sampson. And he just ran it down their throats. There was nothing they could do. And if I remember correctly, I was kind of working on some Big Ten stuff last night with Ohio State and Wisconsin. So I was kind of looking back and forth, but they were in the end zone like that. I mean, Kentucky missed the field goal and Tennessee took advantage as soon as they could. And I mean, that all but put them to bed. It really did. And when Kentucky, I remember they were even saying on the TV, they said, this guy, he hasn't missed a field goal all year. And then it was the worst kick I've seen in my entire life. It missed it by half a football field. It was nowhere near it. And I feel like the air just went out of the stadium at that point. That was a chance for Kentucky. I believe it was 26-24 at that point. That's a chance for them to take the lead. And instead, Tennessee's all of a sudden up 9 or 10. And, by that point, it's just game, set, and match. With how Tennessee's running the ball, you're not going to be able to, even with Devin Leary playing as well he was, you're not going to be able to come back from that. So that's the biggest drive. A sneaky one. Biggest moment at the end would be Joe Milton getting that first down and then sliding, having the wherewithal to slide down. And then Kentucky did their thing with the 10-second runoff and just making sure that Tennessee was not going to give the ball back to Kentucky, even if they knew, they're kind of struggling on that drive. They really were. I mean, they were hitting the downs when it mattered, but throughout the drive, you didn't really have much confidence that they were going to be able to convey it, get down there, kick a field goal. They didn't even have to kick a field goal. They, because Milton got the first down, he played his cards right, and I think he did really well in general on the ground last night. That's been something over the past few weeks that, you got to give him his flowers for it. You really do, because ever since the Alabama game, he's rushed the ball really well. It hasn't been eye-popping in the stat sheet or anything like that, but it's been enough to keep defenses honest. It expands what he's been able to do, and with all of his accuracy issues, you got to give him that, because that was Kentucky going to come back and win that game with Devin Leary passing the ball as well as he was potentially, but not giving them the chance is the thing that's used there, because,
I also just want to have a conversation with Heupel, be like, okay, was he injured? Why was this not game plan? Why was this not week one? Why was this not happening in the Florida game? Why was this not something we were seeing week over week? Was it just he wasn't comfortable with it yet? Now I will say, Joe still does not have a lot of I'm going to make up a word here. Elusivity? I don't know.
Yeah,
he's not an elusive person. Yeah. I don't. He's not an elusive player. And he's not Josh Dobbs or Hendon Hooker in open space here. Yeah. But he's a load to bring down. I just think he beats guys up. And this is something that I think is going to be very important. So when you look ahead to Mizzou in 2 weeks on the road, guess who Mizzou plays next week?
I think Mizzou has... Is it
the University of Georgia on the road,
week, right? Yeah, they're off the bye too.
Yes, so they're going to be banged up, and that's exactly what you want if you're Tennessee going into Columbia. Is Joe is going to have to run the football a bunch, because I think you're going to score a lot. The thing about Mizzou, what's going to be different than this Kentucky offense, which was able to do whatever they wanted against this Tennessee defense, is that I think I said in the group chat where I'm like, Tennessee's just going to win because, not because, simply because the Wildcats can score at will, but they can't score fast. They're just going to take 80. It's going to take 13 plays and 80 yards for them to get down and eventually score a touchdown on Tennessee. Like, but they couldn't do it fast. So 2 scorers with 4 minutes to go. I was like, no, Kentucky can't do this. Like, if they have more time, then sure, but they just can't. Like, they can't score fast. Luther Burden and company and Brady Cook and company, especially with his legs, I think he's going to put up a lot of points. So anyone who's like, oh, look, I am going to tell you, it's going to be a track meet. And what you're going to have to hope is Georgia really bangs around these Missouri defenders and they run the ball really hard at Mizzou next week, because that is going to be a critical part of this. Is you're going to need a banged up Mizzou defense so that Joe and company can run all over them, similar to what they did 2 years ago in Columbia with Tion Evans running for a gazillion yards in Columbia. I think they got the defensive line coach fired after that game from Mizzou, if I remember correctly.
Right, yeah.
So that's what they need in this one. But that's like kind of going around here is just that's something I've got my eye on, is just how big that's going to be for Tennessee going into Columbia, because that's going to be the difference between 9-3 and 8-4. I think is how they fare in Columbia, because it's Georgia. I think anyone who's like penciling in Georgia is like a crazy okay. Tennessee has not lost at home since Georgia in 2021. Like, they're just a different team at home. Like, we'll be a 2-year anniversary of them losing a home game. Like, I don't think they're going to get blown out at home. I think that'll be a close game, and I think it will be a very low scoring, ground and pound. We'll see. We got a while before we get into Georgia, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Either way, what did you think coming into the game that did not ultimately come to fruition on Saturday night in Lexington, Ethan Stone?
I've already said the run defense. I thought that was going to be a lot better for Kentucky. So I'll go different, and I'll say I did not expect Devin Leary, even without Kamal Hadden. I did not expect Devin Leary to have as good of a day as he did. I think, like I get Tennessee's secondary hasn't been good all season, and I was definitely thinking that it would be problematic because they're just. I mean, say what you want about Hadden's tackling. He was one of Tennessee's better players in coverage. He has been all season. And when you replace that with Danico Slaughter and Judy Lawley, who have flashes of being good, but I mean, last night kind of got cooked the entire night by a quarterback who I think his only other game above 300 yards this season was Eastern Kentucky. Don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly certain. I mean, for Leary to play as well as he did is very concerning, in my opinion, because, I mean, coming out of NC State, and I mean, I was one of them that championed this. I thought Leary was going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. That has not turned out. It just has not. He has not played well. They've gone much more with Vanderbilt, transferred Ray Davis on the ground. They want their identity to be running the ball and then throwing the ball second, because Leary has just struggled some. And you can kind of mount some of that to an injury. Obviously, he had his injury all last year, and he's kind of working his way back from that. He's probably not the same quarterback he was in 2021, but for him to have as good of a night as he did against Tennessee secondary, with Georgia and Mizzou coming up, teams that are, I think, 2-3 in the SEC in their passing attack, dude, that's scary. That's not good, because you could have Carson Beck and Brady Cook out here throwing for 400 yards against Tennessee secondary, and then the Vols' ability to run the ball for 300 yards is irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I like that. I think what surprised me, I mean, with the secondary, I mean, Kamal's absence was obviously very much missed in this one. Gabe Judy Lawley, I thought, had a good game. I think he was someone
I didn't want that to sound like he didn't. He did.
Yeah, he was someone I'm pretty comfortable at this point. Like, he's a solid. I don't know. Like, he's a nickel corner who is having to be thrust into being one of the main two now, across from Danico Slaughter. But like, we saw Ricky Gibson get a couple plays in, so it got to the point where they were like, all right, the freshmen are going to have to start playing a little bit here.
Got him.
I thought Jalen McCullough and Wesley Walker were good in the back end. They're fine. I'm not worried about them at this point. But I will say, I want to be nice. Brandon Turnage got like 10 snaps and was awful. Like, that man, I think I just feel bad, because I feel like if we go through his PFF scores, like over his Tennessee tenure, he's got to be the lowest. He's got to be at the bottom of any Tennessee player over the last 3 years. I feel so bad, but I'm like, Warren Burrell was even okay. He got held egregiously and they didn't get call. where all the Tennessee coaching staff lost their mind. That led to a Kentucky touchdown where he's just like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do before you throw the flag. Because I literally can't get this man because I'm being held so egregiously. But like Turnage, man, he is I just really, really bad. Like
he had that one good game against Alabama, like his first year.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that, where he absolutely went off and won SEC Player of the Week. It
Yeah.
has been radio silence since. I will agree with you on that. I didn't see any of those plays specifically from Turnage, know enough of the specifics what you're talking about, but I would not doubt it by any means. I thought he was going to be so much more than he has been at Tennessee. He's been, I don't know. I won't say disappointing because I haven't seen it, but from what you're saying, it doesn't sound great.
Well, there's a couple other surprises for me, and it's in the trenches on both sides, Ethan. So I wonder if you agree with me here. So it's always like one of the things about the trenches with Tennessee is like you noticed immediately when Dane Davis went in for Mincey last week, where I was like, uh-oh, there were some penalties and the offensive line kind of crumbled. You're like, uh-oh. Crawford got some run, and he was awful. Like Crawford had not played in a couple weeks, and he'd been passed by Dane Davis. He had to be thrust into the left tackle spot because John Campbell went out, and Joe Milton was getting crushed during that point. Tennessee wasn't able to run the ball for a little bit. What I'm a little nervous about over the next couple of weeks now is there is no depth on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line is just John Campbell is a sneaky linchpin. We saw it with Cooper early on this year and like what we were looking at, but I think Ollie and company held their own. Like, I don't think we really saw a big drop with it. I mean, obviously crowd noise, but I think crowd noise would have been an issue whether it was Cooper or Ollie or Dane Davis at center at Florida and company. They've been fine. I think you saw that left tackle spot. Like, if you go down there and Mincey, they're just so thin at tackle that you cannot survive with John Campbell going down, because I think that was one of those where I turned to my father-in-law and I was like, this game's over. If John Campbell is not back in this game. Like, Joe's just going to keep getting killed, and they're not going to be able, like, this, his blind side is over in this spot. I don't know if you noticed that, but like, that was something I was surprised was just how noticeable it was. And Crawford, I mean, he was the left tackle who was shutting down Dallas Turner last year, or Will Anderson in the Alabama game at home. Like, we've seen a really good version of Jeremiah Crawford. I don't know what's happened this year, but I mean, it's been a really, really rough year. And I don't know if it's been just the not being able to stay on the field with different things, not getting a routine and all that. But like, man, the tackle spot is so thin that I'm a little nervous about that week to week, because Campbell's banged up, Mincey's banged up, and that is a sneaky thing to monitor, because those guys need to be healthy for Mizzou and Georgia for them to have a chance.
Yeah, your last point hit the nail on the head. I mean, with Mizzou and Georgia, two are the better, probably the better pass rushing teams in the SEC. Georgia, probably college football, and Mizzou probably top 15.
Yeah,
that's the only team Tennessee has faced like that all season has been Alabama. And if those problems keep persisting, that's going to be problematic. Something interesting I've noticed, and I wonder if Heupel is kind of noticing the thinness at offensive line as well, and that's why Milton's been running the ball more. Because it's like year one Justin Fields in Chicago. He had nothing. He's just got to run around for his life. At some point, you almost got to feel like Joe's got to start running more. I mean, if you can connect on these passes, like that beauty to Dante Thornton, that was the best show he's made all year. And I feel like people might not even know what I'm talking about. He's on the run. He fits it between a couple of defenders to Dante Thornton. That's not really anything about the offensive line, but if he can do little things like that once or twice a game, get to the point where you can keep those edge defenders, linebackers honest a little bit, that's going to make all the difference in that case. Because, I mean, you're 100% right. And when John Campbell went out the other day, that was one of the things I noticed is, I mean, the second and third quarter especially were awful. I mean, just truly awful, because, the drives just start stalling. And once you start doing that on the road and giving Kentucky a little bit of momentum, especially with how they started the third quarter, I mean, things are just going to start compounding on top of that. So two good opponents coming up, you got to figure it out.
Oh, 1,000%. And I'm very curious. And I'm also was surprised about Tennessee's pass rush just having nothing. Like, that was Devin Leary had all day. Like, there was no adjustment. And you saw, I think Tyree West only got like 4 snaps. And you look at it, I mean, Tyler Barron wasn't getting home. He got held. And obviously Heupel post game, the silent stuff again. But like, you got to have some about, like, we should have more bodies. There should still be, like, part of it goes back to Banks, where I think I'm so back and forth on what I think about the defensive scheme and the philosophy for this team, because like ultimately it kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier, where like yeah, Kentucky was driving down the field, but like they weren't. Tennessee is like not allowing you to give out the big play. Like you are not going to hit a big passing chunk play on Tennessee. You are not. We're not allowing it. You're not doing it. You're gonna have to beat us with 97 cuts. Like we're not doing the other stuff on the back end. So I appreciate that a little bit. However, at some point you have to be like, all right, when we're sending 4, like this is just we're like James Pierce cannot get home, Joshua Josephs can't get home, like we're gonna have to start sending dudes front. We're gonna have to do some corner blitzes. We're gonna have to send Beasley more. I don't know why that continues to be the thing. It's just kind of stubborn where if the defensive line is not getting home, because like it's tough. It's tough to get through these games when you're like, man, are we really just hoping that James Pierce is able to get through in third quarter? Because it was just clear that was not happening. Like Tennessee was not going to get home with 4, and I mean, they never really sent a lot. They never really brought the house, and maybe that's just the style, and that will never change. But I'm surprised, especially in that kind of environment where the game was very much in doubt throughout, that Banks and company did not get more aggressive, sending 5 or 6 on a lot of design blitzes.
I hadn't really thought about that. My main thought has been about the rushing, and you're right about the sending 4 thing. I mean, at some point you got to get more aggressive, especially when. I mean, especially on the road, right? I mean, Kroger Field's no, the swamp or anything like that, but it's enough. And Tennessee has provenly struggled on the road this season. So you got to give a struggling secondary without probably one of your best corners, some help a little bit in that regard. And, that proves when you're not getting any pass rush and Devin Leary is having his best game as a Wildcat, that just proves your point even more. I will say about the Wildcats, they're one thing. I mean, that offensive line is legit. Like Kentucky's offensive line is for real. Is it an excuse for Tim Banks? I don't think so. No, I mean, especially considering, and like I said, I wasn't watching full blown the entire time, eyes glued to the screen, but I mean, it's apparent. You don't have to watch the screen to know that Tennessee's not sending anybody. I don't think did they get a sack? Did they get any?
No.
Did they? I don't think they did. I was about to say, like,
unless I'm mistaken, I don't think they have a sack. I remember
Kentucky having the ball pretty much like whenever they wanted it. It's just, I said it multiple times in the group chat last night, and obviously people won't know this until I say it, but like, if Kentucky wanted to win that game last night, they would have. It's just Kentucky didn't want to win. That's ultimately like great win for Tennessee. Great job going on the road and doing what you needed to do. But if Kentucky wanted to win that game, they would have. It's just simple as that. And I mean, that's the thing that stands out is James Pierce wasn't able to get to his guy. And when James Pierce isn't able to get to his guy, and he's obviously one of the best in, if not the SEC in the nation, then you're going to struggle in that regard. And it's only going to get tougher against Mizzou and Georgia, who, I mean, are right there on the level with Kentucky's offensive line. So you got to change something. If Haddon's not going to be back, you get a little bit back when Peely hopefully returns here in a couple weeks. But as far as right now with that kind of questionable, I mean, you got to start sending some more people. I agree with you 100% there.
We'll see if they do it, but I have my doubts at this point if that's changing. Was there anything from Josh Heupel coaching wise that stood out to you that kind of maybe the best thing you saw from Josh Heupel coaching in this game, or the worst thing you saw from Josh Heupel in this game?
Nothing specific, but it's getting very concerning how poorly Tennessee is coming out of the halftime break. I think that, I mean, we're a couple weeks in a row now that Tennessee has looked just truly dreadful on both sides of the ball in the third quarter. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not sure I can chalk that down. I'm ready to chalk that down as just a Josh Heupel thing. Like his team's just not really coming out in the third quarter. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to say that, but dude, we got to start having a dialogue. It's like, I mean, obviously Alabama did what they did last week, but what's really underrated is Kentucky's ability to crawl their way back into that. And like I said 2 minutes ago, if they wanted to win that game, if they could have hit that field goal, that changes everything. It doesn't give Tennessee the ball late with Dylan Sampson and his ability to just pound it down their throat. It doesn't do any of that, and the game just changes completely like that. So in that regard, I would almost say, and I hate to say this, that Tennessee got lucky. Because they really did, because Kentucky just didn't want to win that game. So from Heupel's admitted that. He said, like, you got to get better in that regard. You can't come out of the halftime break just, twiddling your thumbs and praying that Kentucky's going to not have adjusted against a coach like Mark Stoops. It's just not going to happen. So that's what stood out to me. As far as I mean, you got to applaud him for just keeping going with the run. I mean, when it's working, it's working. Don't try and get cute. I mean, it's the basic stuff, but I'd say if I had to pick something out from last night that stood out, I'd say that. I mean, at no point did in the second half. I will say this, actually. I'll go back on it a little bit. Awful third quarter. The fourth quarter, honestly, the play calling was exquisite because he simplified it. He said, hey, Kentucky missed that field goal. And like you had said earlier, Kentucky's not able to sustain quick drives. They're not able to quick strike and kind of build their way back into this. So we're just going to run and pound the ball with our guy that's as good as any running back in the SEC and Dylan Sampson, even without Jaylen Wright.
Yeah. I will say, you know what Heupel deserves credit for? Trusting his special teams this week, because Jackson Ross is an absolute assassin. So letting him do that, no dumb 4th and 2 calls. There was just like not any of those where you're like, oh, Heupel, what are we doing? Because that was, I mean, those are huge plays. And I think trusting that, and also Charles Campbell just is as steady Eddie as it gets. So like trusting Campbell to just take the points and getting stopped, doing what he needs to do there, I think was a big one. I also just think I would love to get his like off the record take on the red zone stuff. Be like, hey, why do you suck in the red zone? Why is this just an absolute disaster week over week? Like what actually is it? Because I wonder if it's like, I was listening to a Sports Source this morning, and I think the point that they made that I hadn't really considered and I just kind of forgot is like Princeton Fant had like 9 touchdowns in the red zone last year. And you just kind of overlooked that Princeton Fant was this like Swiss Army knife in the red zone because he wasn't really a fullback. He was not really a tight end, not really a running back, but he was just so hard to bring down, and they really liked using him in the red zone. And they don't really have that. McAllen Castles, I think, is fine, but he's just not that kind of guy. So maybe Okoye can eventually be that guy for Tennessee, but I don't know. I think right now I do wonder how much of just not having that kind of Swiss Army knife when things get tighter has kind of hurt Tennessee. But I would love to know why this group especially just really struggles in the red zone.
Do you think it has anything to do with, and I want to try my very best not to knock on Joe Milton for this week because he really did play very well.
Joe Milton had a great game.
Do you think it has something to do with his decision making? Because I mean, let's be honest here. That's one of his major weaknesses, and that's something in the red zone you got to figure out. You know, I mean, it's tighter. You don't get as many people downfield. The guys are playing in. It's that's the entire point. You're that close. It's tougher to score because you can't get as many routes going. And so you wonder, just with that many people that close, do you think his decision making is just off? Do you think? I don't know. I mean, it's not like they're exclusively trying to thread it through a needle in the air with Joe Milton. I mean, they're trying to, do what they've been doing and just ground and pound. But you almost wonder if that has a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I think that's a possibility. I think it's just complicated. So I would be curious to hear Heupel's full like behind the scenes take on this because I'm sure he has a good answer here. Final thing, Ethan Stone coming out of this weekend. Biggest worry for you coming out of this game, heading into UConn week where they'll be fine, plus 30 or minus 30 out of the gate here. So I think Tennessee will be okay on homecoming week, even though I'm worried that the uniforms are going to be egregious for this one. Just where the Pat Summitt Blue, we found something last year. That was good. The Pat Summitt Blue is great. Like, that's all you got to do. All orange and the Summit Blue. That's all you got to do. That's all. Don't overthink this. The orange helmets do not need. I am so concerned that it's going to be all orange and the orange helmets are coming out for this. Oh my goodness. Just go Summit Blue. It's really not that complicated. But that's neither here nor there. What are you most concerned about, Ethan Stone, coming out of this game?
I'm going to be boring. I'm so sorry. The answer is the secondary. It's just got to be. And it's not just, I'll expound upon that. It's not just the secondary for the sake of saying it's the secondary missing Kamal Haddon. It's the secondary because, as I said earlier, you're facing off against Carson Beck and Brady Cook, who has been, if you don't watch football that much and you hear the name Brady Cook, you roll your eyes at that. He has been elite this year. He has truly been incredible. And he has very good playmakers in Luther Burden, and they have the number 3 passing offense in the SEC. And it's in Columbia where they play very, very, very well. That's terrifying to me. It really is. Because, I mean, I'll go back to the beginning of the show when I said that Tennessee can beat anybody on the ground. I'll revise that. They can beat anybody on the ground if they get, like, just decent help from the defense. If they don't have a South Carolina breakdown from 2022 on defense. And I just, like, I don't see, if the pass rush continues to struggle like we just talked about, if it struggles like it did against Kentucky with good offensive lines like Mizzou and like Georgia, I don't see how Carson Beck and Brady Cook don't just pick the secondary apart, man. I don't see how. I don't know what you do, because I mean,
well, I know what it is. It's James Pearson coming and getting home. Like, that's the only thing that
you're
saves
100%
them.
right. You're, as far as the secondary, I don't know what you like. You're just out of dudes.
No, they're just bad.
You're
right. They're just out of bodies. Like, play
Yeah.
freshmen, like Ricky Gibson play more. Like, I don't know. They're just out of dudes.
Yeah, you exactly. You can play Ricky Gibson, Matthew. You can play all of them, all
Yeah.
you want. You'll get valuable experience for next year. That does not mean you're going to win the football game, brother.
No,
It
no. The
doesn't.
only thing that's saving the secondary is a better pass rush. We've
You're
seen
right.
it. Like, that's the only thing that's going to help, because Kamal hadn't been gone for the year and everything else. Like, it's just,
And you don't want to lump it on just Haddon either and say like that's why Tennessee's all of a sudden having Tennessee's had problems in the secondary.
Yeah.
All year, guys. Like,
but at least he was a playmaker. Like, he was the
Yes.
only playmaker in the secondary. Like,
Yes.
at least he had a couple picks and he had a pick set. Like, he at least had, like, he is someone who could make things happen in some drives by making a play. There's no one in the secondary who's making a play. Like, there's not Warren Burrell, Gabe Judy-Lolly. They're holding their own, but it's like that bend don't break. They're not.
I'd say the closest is Judy Lolly, but I would agree 100% with you.
I would say Danico, but it's just we haven't seen Danico do it all year.
Yeah, he could be one of them for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Judy Lolly hadn't. What is he at? 2 interceptions on the year. He had a pretty good play against.
Does he have a pick?
He does.
He has one. I think he has one.
Who was it against?
I was at the game. I feel like maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not going to waste my time thinking about this, but like the moral of the story is
South Carolina. That could be wrong.
I don't know who the explosive guy is in the secondary unless a freshman comes out of nowhere.
No,
and is that going to happen against Brady Cook and Carson Beck? And I probably not now.
Like, the Vol fans, like, hey, you can beat Mizzou and Mizzou goes off. Like, I just think anyone who's like, all right, how do we slow down Mizzou at home, like on the road? I'm like, you're not. Like, that's not happening. Brady Cook's running all over this defense. They're going to do whatever they want. Luther Burden's going to light this secondary up.
Yep.
Can you win in spite of that is the question I have. Can you win?
You got to win a 45-42 game.
Yes.
You got to do it exactly like LSU did. And unfortunately, LSU has Jaden Daniels and we don't quite.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Like, any Vol fan who's really excited, I'm like, look, man, like they're going to have to score 40 plus to win that game. And I don't know if they can do that.
I would be, I mean, I've said it since Mizzou beat Kansas State and Columbia, to be totally honest. I don't see Tennessee beating this Mizzou team. They're legitimately really good. They really are. And I don't think it's a bad thing for Tennessee to lose to this Mizzou. I mean, based on how they are right now, based on how this team is performing right now, I don't think it's unexpected for Tennessee to lose to Mizzou. I don't think it should be the expectation for Tennessee to win.
No, I mean, but the thing is, if you get that win, then you're just like, Georgia's just gravy, because that might be a game that decides the division. Which is where you want to be. Like, if Georgia can drop, like if Mizzou does the unthinkable and beats Georgia or something, that's your best case scenario. Because like you have no business being in the game for the division against Georgia based on what we've seen from this Tennessee team. But like that's where you want to be with all those recruits in there for Knoxville at the end of the year. Like that's where you want to be. But look, I think you, myself, Ryan, Jack, every Vol fan, like if you get to 9-3, everyone's happy. Like this was a gap year. Everyone saw it as a gap year. Just get to 9-3, get 10-3 with a bowl win. Because also, we end here because I know we got to go, Ethan.
No worries.
The bowl projections after week 9, absolutely disgusting. I don't know if you saw where Tennessee is right now. If the bowl season started, Music City Bowl, which I feel like we're going to play in for the rest of our lives when they're not in a New Year's Six game.
Yeah.
And Rutgers and Minnesota are the 2 Big Ten teams that they would get in this scenario. I'm not watching that. You won't make me sit down and watch Minnesota, Tennessee. Absolutely not. Like what I've seen from Minnesota, where they bring you to hell. Like they are bringing you down to 9-6 territory. Oh my god! And what happened with Purdue a couple years ago?
Just disgusting. Like
this whole football season. Get me. No, I don't want that slop. Don't give me that slop. I did not need to see that. Like, okay, we need to go 10-2 so I can avoid this nonsense because I do not want to watch Music City. Well, that would be 2 games in Nashville in a neutral site this year for the Vols. What are we doing? What would
be so much more fun is Ethan Stone's Saturday Down South Bowl projection of Gator Bowl versus Miami. That would be so much more.
Absolutely. I'm going to that. If I have family in Jacksonville, if they do Gator Bowl, it
would be so much more fun. That's what I think. I mean, I'm a dummy, but
I'm here for it. I'll take it.
No, I wouldn't watch a Music City Bowl against Rutgers. No chance.
Oh.
No way. No way. I'm not watching that.
They're losing that game too, and you're gonna hate it. It's the Greg Schiano discourse game. Are you kidding me?
Gavin Wimsatt.
Greg Schiano, if he beats Tennessee, oh my God. The Vol fans
they
on
could beat
Twitter.
Tennessee, but Rutgers is balling. They're playing well. Man.
I know, but I'm just saying, like never mind. We don't have to relitigate all
we
that.
don't need to talk.
All right. Well, Ethan Stone, go check out SaturdayDownSouth.com today if you are not already. What are you doing if you're a college football fan not checking out SaturdayDownSouth.com each and every day? Ethan, always a pleasure. I'll talk to you next week.